Hello there folks, and welcome to another lesson from Simply PE, and we're going to be looking specifically today at the AQA GCSE coursework. And more specific than that, we're going to be looking at section A of the coursework. There's two sections, A and B, and we're going to be looking at section A, the analysis. So, first and foremost, if we look at the overview of the coursework, so what do you need to know about in regards to this coursework? Well, it makes up 10% of your GCSE, so that's a significant portion in regards to your overall syllabus. So this coursework, this written or verbal piece of coursework, should be taken under huge consideration, and you've got to make sure you put the effort in regards to getting that 10%. It makes up 25% of your overall practical grade. So if you remember, in terms of your practical performances and your sport, you have got Sport 1, which is your individual sport, that's worth 25 marks. You've got Sport 2, which is a team sport, and that again is worth 25 marks. And then Sport 3, which is either individual or team-based, and that again is 25 marks. So that, and on top of the coursework that you'll be doing now, that equates to 100 marks. So in regards to the coursework description, what do you specifically need to do for this coursework? Well, this is an analysis and evaluation piece of coursework. So you're going to be looking at analysing a performance, okay, and then evaluating that, looking at an action plan. So we're going to be looking at an activity from the GCSE specification, and my advice to you should be to use one of the activities, one of the sports that you are probably currently doing in your three sports, okay, because you're going to be more comfortable with talking about that specific sport. As it says there, you can evaluate, you can analyse your own performance or someone else's performance, but most people generally analyse their own performance. So we're going to be looking at section A, and this is the analysis section. This is worth 15 marks of your overall 25 marks, and you're going to be specifically looking at identifying two strengths and two weaknesses of your performance. When we come on to section B, which will be on another Flip Learning video, we'll be looking at the evaluation section. And again, this is worth 10 marks of your overall coursework. And as I said before, this then starts to, you'll have identified your two weaknesses, and you'll start to come up with an action plan of how you would improve those specific weaknesses. So let's look at section A, the analysis. Okay, so what you're going to be doing is you're going to be referring to recent sporting competitive performances. Now I know at this particular time during lockdown that is difficult, so you'll be able to kind of either focus on competitive performances in the past, or we can come back to this a little bit later in regards to adding some of these performances in, hopefully when lockdown is over. So as I said before, you're going to be identifying two strengths, one which is a fitness component, and one strength which is either a skill or technique or a strategy or a tactic. You're going to do the same for weaknesses. You're going to find one weakness which is based on a fitness component of your choice, and one weakness of a skill or technique or strategy or tactic. You're also going to include some notational analysis, and what we refer to in regards to notational analysis is identifying those strengths, those weaknesses in regards to limitations, okay, through some data. And you'll be doing that through a specific performance or during one specific match, and you may get some other people involved who might actually analyse and note take your performance regarding data. So when we think of notational analysis, as it says there, it's the study of movement patterns, strategies, and maybe the tactics in regards to team sports. When it comes to individual sports, we may be looking at a bit more data in regards to mid-range shots, long-range shots in regards to basketball, how many points we scored with our right-hand layup, with our left-hand layup, and so on. And that's what it says here in regards to this slide. So as I said before, hopefully you might get someone to actually help you with this notation and analysis, and you'll see that it comes in the form of maybe a tally chart, as you can maybe see there, in terms of passes complete and incomplete, headers won and lost. You might look at tackles, you might look at shots if it's an invasive sport, and you can present this in your presentation, in your Word document, through as a form of a table, as so, a pie chart or a bar chart, whichever you're most comfortable with. So, you're probably sat there now listening to this all. Where do I start? So in regards to that, obviously the first thing that I would be doing is thinking about the sport that you feel most comfortable, confident in being able to talk about. A sport that maybe you perform at the moment, and you start to identify, you start to know what some of your strengths are and what some of your weaknesses are. It must be from the GCSE PE specification list of sports. Okay, you can access that through the AQA website, or obviously speak to your specific PE teacher who can guide you in regards to that list of sports. So the first task that you might think about doing is thinking about this mini profile task. And here you're looking at identifying and creating a small profile of yourself. And this could be in the form at the moment as a spider diagram, as a little bit of prep. Thinking about what have you achieved maybe in your sport? How often do you play your particular sport that you're going to be focusing on? What position or what role do you play in that specific sport? And also, what are the basic fitness and skill requirements for your sport? Now, in terms of components of fitness, I've just listed them there on the slide for you to remind you of those different components of fitness. But what you'll need to do specifically with these is start to identify what is one of those components of fitness as a strength for you, and why is that a specific strength of yours? Which one of these components of fitness is a weakness of yours, and why specifically is it a weakness in your specific performance? And finally, once you've identified a strength and a weakness, you need to ensure that you know the definition of those two specific components that you're focusing on. Now, in terms of components of fitness in regards to the strength, once you've defined that component of fitness, you should be going through the next few questions, okay, to help you eventually start to develop and create a detailed paragraph. So when is it used in your activity? If we're looking at flexibility, for example, we know that definition is the range of movement at a joint. So when is it used specifically in gymnastics? We'd have to give some detail. Why is it used in that specific sport? And why is it important in that specific role or position, or more generally in that sport if there is no role or position, if it's not an invasive sport? How does it help with performance? We've got to ensure that we give sport-specific and subject-specific terminology, words. And then finally, the main bulk of your paragraph and paragraphs here for this section will be looking at providing 3 or 4 competitive situations that maybe you've been involved in. It might be teams that you've played in the past. It might be in some competitions that you've performed in. And you've got to give 3 or 4 specific examples of where you've demonstrated and used that component of fitness successfully, and why was it successful in your performance? How did it help your performance? We're doing exactly the same then for the component of fitness for weakness. Okay, again, we define what the weakness is in terms of what we've identified. Why is it useful in our sport? Why do we need it? Why is it important for our specific role or position or sport? How's it useful in our performance? And then you've got to give 3 or 4 specific examples of where you've clearly identified this as a weakness. And more importantly, how has it had a negative impact, negative effect on your performance? Again, there's got to be sport and subject specific terminology involved here too. We then focus on skills. So by skills, we're talking about things like shooting, tackling, passing, okay, those type of things. As it says there, shooting in netball, layups, it could be in basketball, an overhead smash in badminton and so on. You've got to identify again one strength and one weakness in regards to the skills. Once you've done that, once you've identified the strength and the weakness, what you then need to do is you need to start to break down that skill. Okay, what I mean by that is you need to start positioning yourself a bit like a coach or a bit like a teacher where you might break down that skill. So what are the key points of that specific skill in order for it to be executed properly? Am I looking at the fingers? Am I ensuring that I extend at the elbow if I'm looking at shooting in basketball? Okay, am I stepping forward, for example, if I'm doing a chest pass, as you can maybe see there in that diagram? But we've got to give specific details. So again, we show the moderator, we show the examiner that you know the specific technique for that specific skill. Again, here you might want to include different images and again, sport-specific terminology. So again, once you've identified that strength skill, again, you're thinking about the different forms of that skill in terms of how they can be performed, when that skill might be used in sport, and why it might be used in your specific sport or your specific position. Again, how's it helpful in a competitive situation? And you've got to give 3 or 4 clear examples again in a sporting competitive situation of where you've used that skill strength. You might also want to apply some different theories, and this will come into a bit more detail when we look at the evaluation section specifically. And the same for the skill weakness. Okay, you've identified the weakness, you've identified maybe the different forms of the skill that could be maybe used and performed. Okay, if it was shooting in basketball, you might then look at layups, for example. It's another form of shooting. Okay, when you might use that skill, why is it important in your sport and in your position? Okay, and how can it be obviously helped in regards to a competitive situation? And then think about when you've maybe demonstrated a weakness in that skill in a competitive situation. Again, you've got to give 3 or 4 different examples here, and how has that again had an impact in regards to your performance overall. Now, I've identified here for you the mark scheme, okay, and it goes from level 0 all the way through to level 5. Now I think the majority of you, if not all of you, will be looking to aspire towards that top level band in regards to 5. But I've put there the examples of 2, 3 and 4 more specifically so that you can see what is the difference in those levels. If we look at level 3, for example, and if you got 7 to 9 out of 15 for this section A, we're looking at the fact that you've got some knowledge, you've got some appreciation of the demands, okay, but some of it is a little bit unclear in places. If we look at the the 5th column along, where it says the justification, inclusion, including impact on the activity, okay, it talks about there the strengths and weaknesses being justified, some fully, some not, okay, but as it says there at the end of that sentence there is only some impact given, but often to a single performance. So here, the candidate will have only given 1 example, when you should be giving at least 3, if not 4, competitive examples. If we look at the top band in terms of level 5, okay, as it says there, excellent knowledge, there's appreciation of the demands of the activity, there's full sort of detail given in regards to movement and terminology, there's depth, it's detailed. Again, there's strong justification. You've always got to justify why is that skill important, why is that weakness a negative in terms of our performance, and so on. Now, in terms of where we should go from here, so I would be thinking about these 6 specific tasks for your section A. First of all, trying to produce a title page in regards to naming it performance analysis. Okay, maybe put a picture of yourself playing the sport if you have one, or the sport in general. Then creating a mini profile of yourself. As I said before, what position do you play? You know, what's been your sporting achievements in that specific sport? Your general fitness, your skill level. Then thinking about the specific strength of component of fitness and a weakness of component of fitness. Being able to define it. I'm going to give you some example pieces of coursework for you to look through as well, okay, and that will be attached within your class charts. And then finally, number 6, developing those paragraphs using the slides previously that we've looked at, where it was components of fitness for strength and weaknesses. I can't give you any written feedback. I can only give you some verbal feedback. Good luck.